All right, so let's move on to our next W. We have wildlife. Again, this one is pretty self-explanatory because we know wildlife, there's not much we can do with this topic, right? We're not going to prevent birds from flying over the fields. We're not going to prevent deer from walking through our fields 100% of the time, right? So we just have to know it's a risk and we have to manage that risk as best we can. So we know animals, these same animals, even our lovely pets and or pet cats and dogs, right? We know they can carry pathogens. And as we always joke, Scott and my colleague who we teach this a lot together, do we really want to eat what the dog just rolled in? Right? And that's the question you ask yourself. And it's probably no. All right. So we just know that these things can carry pathogens. 100% of the time, probably not, but they can, right? So it's a risk. So we're going to want to monitor our populations. So, right, if you're only seeing a few deer here and there, the risk is low. But if it's something where, you see this path or these deer are passing through your field every single day, many times a day, then there's a much higher risk. And so we just want to monitor what those populations are. So during the growing season, we're going to look for feces and evidence of intrusion. So this is before we just have plants in the field, right? We're not harvesting at this point. We're going to look at the risk of fecal contamination on the produce and what are some of these past observations and what could be attracting the wildlife to your field if you're seeing a lot of wildlife, right? But now immediately prior to harvest, this is the important part, especially when we talk about seeing evidence of fecal contamination or sign of animal activity, because we don't have that time for that die-off to happen, because this is going to be right before we're going to harvest. So if we see that, we see fecal contamination, we see trampling, we have to decide, even if it's not on the harvestable portion of the crop, we have to make that decision whether there's at least some of it we can harvest safely or not. And the answer is usually yes. There will be some you can harvest safely, but there could be, sometimes when there's not much. I've seen pictures of growers that they've called me and, the neighbor's goats got into their kale field and just trampled everything. There wasn't anything still standing upright. Well, what do you do then? Right? There's not much you can do because who knows what poop and pee and other things are in there. So again, any of these management decisions, we're basing them on risk. And when we say management, we don't mean elimination, right? We just have to manage them. We're not out there killing the birds and shooting deer and things like that. We have to manage our environment. And so we always talk about striking a balance, right? So this is how can you have stewardship of the land, making sure we're conserving our natural resources, conserving our environment, but making sure we can still address those food safety needs that we have on our farm, right? So, and it is just striking a balance. So how do you go about doing that? So one way we can try to deter some of the wildlife. So you can put out decoys. My experience, they work for a little while and then they don't work anymore. We had a grower one time that said he had one of these coyote things he put out. When he went in the fall to bring it in, he said there were 13 bullet holes in his decoy. So it was certainly fooling somebody, but probably not what he was trying to keep out of there. You can do fencing where you can have these double fences, and that's very good for deer. And usually these are electrified, so they'll jump over that first one and then hit that second one, and they can't get over that. And so they'll go and usually they're not coming back. So that's pretty good for deer. You can do netting in some of these really high fences for deer, but I've been amazed. I've been out in farms and I see these fences that I can't imagine a deer could jump over, and they say, no, it doesn't work. They still can get over that. So we can use noise deterrents. So these cannons, repellents, we can try to capture them and relocate them. You can use these visual deterrents. I see a lot of these people who use like old CDs and hang them because how they hit the sunlight, it keeps changing, and that will deter some wildlife. But again, I think the take home is something will work for a little while, but not anything forever. right? So you kind of probably have to keep changing things up. So using draft animals for production is totally allowed. But again, just know that these horses or whatever working animals you're using are going to be pooping in the field. And we do have a large population of plain communities in Indiana, and the ones I've been to, they do this fabulously. So what they'll have is basically a grass lane in between the production fields, and that's the only lane that those horses and wagons, or the horses pulling the wagons or whatever harvest tools they need, that's the only place they go. And then if the horses do poop, they have a bucket and shovel where they immediately scoop it up and then go about their business. So there's absolutely ways to still continue to use working animals, but maintain any food safety concerns that we may have.